Hey everybody, JCB here with The Awesomeness, and you're watching The Awesomeness YouTube channel. In case you couldn't tell from the title of this video, it's going to be a little bit different. It's also going to be a little bit longer than my normal videos, so I broke it up into chapters. That way you can always pause it and come back later to enjoy the rest.
You still don't understand what you're dealing with, do you?
Remember back in 2022 when AI was just this strange new toy that everyone was playing with? You remember those first generation AI image generators? Where maybe if you squinted and stood back a bit, it kind of looked like the thing you asked it to create? Well, back then, messing with ChatGPT was sort of a novelty, though some people were definitely taking it too far. Essentially praying to these tools and treating them like they're some all-knowing supernatural entities, when in reality, they're basically just autocorrect on steroids. I'm so glad that we as a species have finally figured that out and no longer use these tools for tasks they were in no way designed to perform. God damn it. Anyway, back in 2022, when AI seemed like it was just this trend that would either evolve into a tool you sometimes use like Grammarly, or maybe even go the way of the metaverse, there were a lot of people poking and prodding and trying to test the limits of what these tools could do. And there were a lot of these types of articles about people trying out new things they could ask ChatGPT to automate for them. And I was there right along with them, just playing around with these tools, trying to figure out what are they good at and what are they laughably bad at. To this day, these tools are still really bad at a lot of things. Now, of course, the die-hard AI fans still believe that these tools are really, really smart, but that's because they've fallen into what I call the blind spot trap. Most users aren't asking AI questions about things they already know a lot about. I mean, why would they? Instead, we tend to ask about things we need help with, things we don't know. This creates a blind spot. We get information that we are ill-equipped to evaluate, so if it sounds right, we accept it as fact. The fastest way to see for yourself the true limitations of AI is to ask it specific questions about niche things that you know a lot about. That's when you'll see that there's a lot more artificial there than there is intelligence. Hopefully more people come to understand this aspect of AI tools because an over-reliance on artificial intelligence is already having consequences on society.
You might have a very minor case of serious brain damage.
So believe it or not, being a YouTuber is not my full-time job. If it was, I'd be homeless. No, instead, I, for some reason, decided to become a teacher. And let me tell you, there is no place where AI should be more highly regulated and reined in than when it comes to people under the age of 18. You think cell phones are a problem in schools? You are way behind the times. Students try to use AI for everything, and not just writing assignments like you might expect. They try to use it for math, and science, and history, and computer programming, and even art classes. The one class where you're encouraged to express and find yourself. Yeah, let's just outsource that to AI. Because why learn how to do anything or have any skill of any sort when you can just float through life like one of those fat bastards in WALL-E? But my passions have always been in the creative spaces. I'm in a really awesome band called Losers of the Year. Check us out wherever you stream music. And since I've been making film since I was a literal child, teaching high school kids about media and film seemed like a great way to avoid that whole being homeless problem. But the only reason I can teach that stuff is because I took the time to learn it. But some kids in 2026 just don't seem to recognize the value of knowing things. Not when there's a seemingly all-powerful entity that they can just ask, and ask, and ask. Often the same questions, over and over, never bothering to learn or even memorize the answer. It's just like a backup brain for them. And that's why I wanted to make this video. I kind of went down that road. I tried to stand on the shoulders of AI to make a new tool, and ended up learning something completely different in the process.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
So back in the late part of 2022, I had an idea. See, I had written a screenplay, and I wanted to get some feedback on what I had written. Typically when writers want feedback on their screenplay, they use a coverage service. Essentially, for a fee, a human with experience in writing, and hopefully, if you're lucky, experience in the film industry, will read your script and offer unbiased feedback and advice on your story. These services can cost anywhere from $45 to $500 depending on the reader, the service, the amount of feedback you're asking for. So I had completed a screenplay, but I didn't want to waste a bunch of money on feedback when I knew it had problems that I had already planned to fix in the second draft. Because I knew those problems would be the sole focus of the coverage. I mean, how could they not be? They were obvious. So I needed a new tool. Something that can serve as a step between a spell check and a professional script reading service. I needed something that would check for things like plot and theme and character development. So I wondered if this is something AI could do for me, Could it give my script a first pass so that I don't waste a real human's time with these dumb and obvious problems, and I could therefore get more bang for my buck later? So I tried what anyone would try. I copied and pasted my script page by page into ChatGPT and asked it for feedback. And it wasn't long before I ran into a problem. At the time, ChatGPT just couldn't process that much data in a way that allowed it to speak intelligently on the script as a whole. It would start off strong. It would ask questions about things. It would tell you the things it liked and the things it didn't. But before long, it would start to forget basic aspects of the story. Character names, events that had taken place. It would get completely lost, like someone who showed up to a movie an hour late and couldn't follow along. Imagine if you could remember information for only as long as it was physically on your screen, but the moment you scrolled down, the text that left the screen was erased from your memory. At any given moment, the AI would only have a very narrow slice of the total context of the story, and as a result, it would ask questions and act confused about things that were happening because it had forgotten the things that had already happened. It was like the president, halfway through a sentence, lost and confused in a big wet diaper. And that's when I realized if I was going to try to do this, I would need to make a special tool.
It is a limitation we must learn to accept.
Of course, at this point, I had a very limited understanding of computer programming and web design. By that I mean in the 90s, I made some very basic web pages as well as some video games in Quick Basic and later Visual Basic. But hey, it's 2022, we have a different old grandpa president, and these new AI tools are just so capable. So I wondered, could I make a website that would allow other people to upload their scripts and get it analyzed using nothing but AI tools? The first thing I did was ask ChatGPT what steps I needed to take to make the website. And then I started doing all the things that it laid out. This included setting up hosting services, buying a domain name, and laying out all the various pages that would be needed to make the site work. Now this is where I would insert a Squarespace ad, but they're not sponsoring this video, so you don't have to skip ahead. Anyway, one of the biggest hurdles was learning how to code server-side applications, which I had never done before. I had to learn how to implement WebSockets, set up server security settings, payment methods, and then the various dependencies required to make the code function. I had no experience with JavaScript or PHP, which were the two languages I would end up using for the website. I had no idea how APIs worked. I just knew that you had to use an API in order to exchange data with OpenAI's servers. Even though I could have designed and drawn all the logos and artwork I used on the site myself, I am a graphic designer after all, I decided to use AI tools for the images on the site as well, just so I could say every single aspect was created with AI. See, if you remember back in 2022, that was the kind of thing that got news outlets excited. A teacher built an entire AI script analyzing website using nothing but AI tools? That's an AI news article's dream story. And with ChatGPT, the articles could literally write themselves. So my thinking at the time was using nothing but AI tools to make the site could be both a fun challenge and a great way to get some free publicity once the site was done. Of course, if you've seen the title of this video, you know the site's no longer functional, but when it was online, it worked like this.
A triumph equaled only by its monumental failure.
When a user visited the site, they were presented with this homepage that included any new updates or features. Across the top were some helpful links like an FAQ, the About Us page, and the Redeem Key Code page, which allowed people to use key codes they purchased earlier or were gifted to them. The typical user would experience the site like this. They would decide they wanted to try the service, click the buy button at the bottom, and be taken to a secure payment page on Stripe.com. They would enter their payment details and be sent to this thank you page. Now behind the scenes, Stripe would send my server an authorization code which would be stored in a database. Then it would take you to the same Redeem Key Code page, except the key code text field would already be populated with the activation codes sent to my server by Stripe. The user would upload their PDF file, the site would verify the key code, and the magic would happen. I won't bore you with the details, but essentially, behind the scenes, the code would open the PDF file now stored temporarily on my server and look at the very first page for the script's title. Then it would start looking for scene headings in the script. These are also called slug lines, and they usually look like this. This line basically creates rules for what to look for. I include as many variations of popular slug line formats I could think of, since these things are standardized, but people like to make up their own formatting sometimes. But even if the script didn't follow the Hollywood standard of script writing, the code would still work. Because whether they were properly formatted scenes or not, the code would break the script into chunks small enough to stay below the limits of OpenAI's models, but large enough to not require a ton of API calls. This was a major hurdle because anyone who's used these tools knows you tend to hit that token limit really early, and this was especially true back in 2022. So chunking the script out so it stayed within the prompt limits of ChatGPT was super important. Because not only do you have to worry about sending the API too much data and getting an error instead of a response, But the token limits are also affected by the response from the API. So you can't use all 4,000 tokens on the prompt or you'll have nothing left to get your response back. At least that's how it worked at the time. Who knows how it works now. But as a programmer, you have no idea what the AI's response is going to look like or how many tokens it will require. Nor could I know what any given script is going to look like. So controlling these token values meant allowing just enough buffer for both a prompt and a robust response to be sent and received. This meant smaller chunks of the script had to be processed with more frequent prompts, which complicated things because not only would it take longer to process the entire script, and not only would it be more expensive to use more API calls, but you couldn't ask it a simple question like, analyze this scene and tell me what you like and dislike or if you see any problems. Because the chunk it was being sent might be a whole scene if it was short enough, but it might also just be part of a really long multi-page scene. This meant I had to be really crafty with the way my code chunked up the script, and I also had to be really crafty with the wording of my prompts. Anyway, chunk by chunk, the script would be sent to the AI, and then it would be asked questions about the screenplay. Not only questions about plot points and character arcs and pacing, but also things like which genre best suits the story? What rating do you think the MPAA would give this film if it were made? And it worked. Sort of. After about 6 months of vibe coding, the site was functional and working. The site would read your script, create a report, and email you a link to download it. I even made a game.
Shall we play a game?
During the earliest versions of the site, before anyone else got to see it, I would have to sit on this screen and wait while the entire script was processed by ChatGPT. If I closed this window, I would lose all of the incoming data stream, which normally meant I couldn't see any errors that might come through, and I definitely couldn't see the results of the entire script's process. It was a bad design for sure. And I did eventually make it so the user can close this page. But for far longer than I'd like to admit, I sat and stared at the screen just waiting for results. It took about 1 minute to process each page of a script, and I had to test really long scripts in order to be sure the site could handle anything people threw at it. So I was stuck on this page for 2 full hours, more times than I care to even try to count. And I couldn't update the code until the process was complete, or I wouldn't know if there were any issues to address. Needless to say, I got bored pretty quick. So after I had finished making any cosmetic changes to the site that I could do while I waited, I decided, hey, what if I made like a Pac-Man type game? A few hundred iterations later, and I had Banana Grabber, named after the one-off joke in Arrested Development. You play as a monkey trying to escape an old temple by collecting bananas, but evil AI monkeys are trying to eat them first. It's an allegory. By the way, if you want to try playing this very buggy game, I did leave a link in the description below. I do want to stress that it really only works on computers. I never really got the touchscreen functionality working properly, and at this point, it's not worth going back to fix. There are power-ups and multiple difficulty settings, but even this relatively short code gave ChatGPT a hard time. In fact, it would try to take stupid shortcuts, like instead of writing code that performs a specific task, like, for example, muting the music, it would just write, quote, function that mutes music goes here. So you can imagine the issues that came about with this mess. I pretty quickly got to the point where I couldn't have ChatGPT work on the entire code of the game or the site. I had to figure out which sections needed changes and then ask about that specifically. But before long, I stopped using ChatGPT to write code altogether. At least when it came to this specific website and this specific game, I had learned enough about how to code through this process that I just didn't need it anymore. Now don't get me wrong, there were still things I didn't know. I mean, that's true to this day. I am by no means a 10x engineer or whatever. But I got to the point where instead of just having ChatGPT do everything, I would ask it questions about the things I didn't understand and then use its response to learn how to do what I was trying to do. Which doesn't seem all that different from learning how to code through reading old web forums and GitHub posts.
Here come the test results. You are a horrible person. That's what it says. A horrible person. We weren't even testing for that.
Eventually I did get it fully functional and hosted online, but every now and then there'd be a problem with the report. It would just like hallucinate some weird thing, and it was very rare, and it would usually only end up in one part of like just like a random section of the report, but I still wanted to fix it. The problem is I needed more data. So I figured it was time for some real-world beta testers. I went on a few screenwriting subreddits and asked the mods there if I could post the link. And when they said yes, I would make a post. The post usually talked about what the goal of the tool was and the realistic expectations they should have. And then I told anyone who wanted to try it to DM me for a free code. And a lot of people reached out. I had a lot of people give me a lot of really valuable feedback, and I was able to tweak the code and make the site better. A lot of the feedback actually tended to be about the reports themselves, which I totally understand. This was not ideal, and one of the hardest things to tweak, because the replies sent back from OpenAI were unpredictable and had their own formatting or sometimes lack thereof. To this day, I still get replies to these old posts asking if they could try my tool, but it no longer exists, and here's why.
You installed a learning model you could barely comprehend, hoping that I would figure it out all on my own.
So the site was live and I was in the midst of testing it, and testing was going really well. At this point, only one paying customer had run into an actual technical issue, but I worked with him and made sure he got the report he paid for, and things were progressing nicely and the site was working. And then I saw a new version of ChatGPT was coming out. I can't remember now if it was GPT 3.5 Turbo or actually GPT 4. It's been too long, but I feel like it was 4. So I decided I couldn't launch the site using an old model when a brand new one was about to make it obsolete. But I also couldn't just switch it over because I didn't know how GPT-4 would perform on this type of specific task. So I was going to have to do a lot more coding and a lot more testing before I could launch the site properly. At first I was optimistic. OpenAI was making all kinds of promises about the new model. Larger token capacity meant my chunk size could be bigger, which could mean fewer API calls per script, better context understanding for reports, and essentially more profit for me without raising prices. Oh, I should mention, my site's price for a screenplay analysis report was $10, and you would get so many pages of notes. I mean, look at this thing. Just pages and pages of useful information about each and every specific scene of your script. And again, I wasn't trying to replace script readers or script reading services. This is just going to be like a first read tool, like a middle step between Grammarly and a professional script coverage service. Basically, if you're worried your script might be so bad you'd be embarrassed to show someone, you could use my tool to figure out if that was in fact the case, or if it had potential. But with GPT-4, no matter what I did, it would hallucinate like crazy. It would make up entire scenes and characters that never existed, and then it would try to suggest fixes for things that weren't problems, and then be confused later that the fixes it had come up with weren't implemented in the script it was still reading. It didn't seem to matter how small I made the chunks, how clear I tried to make the prompts, nothing worked. So I started researching how could I try to make this work better, and there was just no information. GPT-4 was just too new. So I had an idea of allowing the user to choose which model they want to use, and then base the number of tokens and the size of the chunks and even the prompts themselves on that choice, which made me think maybe I should also try to include Google's AI, Bard, as an option, and I started looking into its API. During this time, I also made some real optimization changes to the codebase that made it more efficient and less likely to have weird communication errors or crash. You know what? It doesn't matter because Gemini killed my site.
Not like me. A T1000s. Advanced prototype.
Sad news, guys. Bard is dead. Let's lower the flags to half-mast. But the good news is Google has a new AI to replace Bard, and it's a lady. Introducing Gemini, the at the time new AI tool powered by Google that to all of our displeasure would soon power Google. What can I say? It's not a great time to be alive. Immediately upon release, Gemini was at least as competent as ChatGPT, but it had one killer feature that OpenAI never had. And by killer feature, I mean a feature that would kill my site dead in its tracks. That was the ability to open Google Docs or upload documents to it that would then be analyzed immediately. Why pay my site $10 for a one-time report when Google Gemini could do as many scripts as you like for a $20 monthly service fee? Plus with Gemini, you could ask follow-up questions, or you can correct it if it starts to hallucinate for some reason. And my site wasn't even functioning properly anymore unless I reverted it back to ChatGPT 3, which made it even less appealing. Now, to be fair, at the time, Gemini wasn't great at analyzing 120-page scripts and had a lot of the same limitations ChatGPT had, but I knew in that moment it was just a matter of time before those issues were resolved.
Test complete, preparing to power down and begin diagnostics.
Another nail in the coffin was that other AI script analysis sites were starting to appear, and while they charged more and some of the reports looked vague and basic and generic as hell, the uniqueness of my site was gone, which would put a damper on getting any real publicity. I just took too long to launch. I missed the very narrow window of opportunity when people were genuinely interested in what new things these tools could do. And also, by the time Gemini had launched its upload feature, public sentiment on these tools had started to sour. And by public sentiment, I mean my own. I had also lost any interest in giving these people any more of my money. These big tech companies have burned through whatever goodwill or benefit of the doubt the public ever had for them. Between stealing water rights for data centers and creating horrible social networks like Sora 2, which somehow have both overly restrictive content filters and also allowed me to make this monstrosity, AI has burned all of its bridges. It's ruined Google search results, which used to be so trustworthy that it could end an argument between friends just like that. But now, you do a Google search and everybody questions the first result because it's an AI generated response and nobody believes that crap. And don't even get me started on Grok or, excuse me, Mecha Hitler. As the students in my class might say, AI is cooked, fam. It's chopped AF, 6'7" or whatever.
How much did you say these things cost?
So to recap, a whole bunch of things happened within a very short amount of time that completely doomed my site. The novelty of an AI script analysis tool was gone due to dozens of such services popping up. The ability to upload and analyze files quickly cropped up on every existing AI platform within weeks of Gemini introducing the feature. The public sentiment on AI projects as a whole had soured, and I never figured out how to recapture the quality of the reports I was getting with the older models. Apparently, there's a whole bunch of AI weirdos upset that GPT-5 came out because they felt like it was worse than GPT-4, and some of them actually felt like they had lost a friend, like it had been killed off by OpenAI, which is sad for all the wrong reasons. But I can definitely relate to the idea of these updates clearly demonstrating the law of diminishing returns. While the overall functionality of these things might get better, the experience seems to be getting worse and worse with every update. And I think that's why the AI bubble seems like it's ready to burst. We're over it. It's washed, chopped, and cooked, Unc. It's broccoli. It has negative aura, and its output is Ohio. So why should companies and investors continue to dump money on the bonfire that is the AI industry? The bottom line is people have seen these tools. We've played around with them for a little bit. Some of them have found their way into our toolbox to simplify tedious tasks, like rewriting a work email you typed when you were angry so that you don't get fired, or alphabetizing a sloppy list of things in a text document. Or heck, there's a lot of really cool AI tools that artists can use to help them make things faster. And that's the thing we've all come to realize. We don't need a tool that spits out fully built houses. We need a nail gun to replace our hammer. Something that will help us eliminate the need to perform tedious, repetitive tasks manually. And honestly, tools like ChatGPT were pretty much there back in 2022. They might be more capable now, but to the average consumer, the potential customer, GPT-3 had 90% of what we wanted to use. And that's the issue. There just isn't enough interest in or use cases for the technology to justify shoving it into everything. Businesses invested billions of dollars because they thought they were going to be able to fire their staffs and replace them with AI. But every single business that has tried to do that has realized it doesn't work out so well. Not only does the company suffer from terrible AI employees screwing things up, but you alienate your customers and earn a reputation as a company that does not care about people. And who would have money to buy companies' products if everyone's been fired and replaced with AI? I mean, what are these idiots thinking? If they get their way and we have this weird AI future, that's the end of capitalism. And whether that's in a positive, utopian Star Trek kind of way, or a negative, dystopian Mad Max kind of way, would depend entirely on politicians and governments making smart choices, which we know ain't happening anytime soon. So yeah, I made an AI tool and it failed miserably. But in the process, I learned a lot about coding. I also learned a lot about how these AI systems work, and why all this crap is a big waste of everybody's time.
The earth will crack with the weight of your failure.
Eventually, I just stopped paying for the domain and shut the server down. So if you go there now, it's some scammy looking domain squatter. I still have all the code, but I don't think it's worth anything to anyone, and that's the real actual lesson here. For something to have value to people, it has to require effort to create. It has to provide them with something they couldn't do for themselves or create on their own. I eventually did get to the point where I was doing all the coding myself, and that was real work, and it had value, at least to me. But at the start, I was just vibing my way through it. Like, I was the head product engineer, and the chat was just a junior programmer. I'd say, hey, make this for me, and it would just do it. And that's the problem with these tools like Nano Banana, Midjourney, and the now defunct Sora 2. Instead of AI just taking over the boring, tedious stuff we hate doing, they're trying to make it take over the creative, fun stuff we enjoy doing. But if something doesn't require any time, effort, or talent to make, then it doesn't have any value. I mean, why would I want to watch your AI slop when I can make and watch my own AI slop just as easily? You know what else everyone can make without needing any talent, training, time, or energy? Farts. And just like farts, AI slop is worthless. Nobody wants your farts, and nobody wants your slop. So my prediction is the AI bubble will burst, I'll get to live through a 5th, once-in-a-lifetime recession, And when the dust settles, we'll end up with a handful of AI tools that we can use when we want to and aren't being constantly shoved down our throats every moment of every day. At least, that's my hope. But what do you think? Let me know down below. As always, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, keep being awesome. The animatronics at Magic Mountain are amazing. Looks like a real goose.
And another thing. Oh, hold on a second.
Oh my god, you guys, it's Mr. Six dancing around there. Oh my god, crazy. Bugs Bunny has officially been evicted.